today we have our another new episode, and we will discuss on gender issues. We have our world famous speaker, Professor Edward, Professor Smith, and we have our new speaker, Madam Tahira Amir. Thank you for joining today's session. First, I would like to give chance Madam Tahira Amir Sultana Khan.
You're muted.
Hello?
Yes.
Hi. Can you hear me? Okay, great.
Yeah. We are discussing about gender issues. What do you think? The gender issue is real in 21st century? What is happening and how we can think different solution for gender issues, especially for glass ceiling factor? Professor Edward, you want to respond?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, let me start off because I've got to get off in a few minutes here. Today, this is a very important day to have this discussion because 146 years ago, on July 4th, 1776, the following document was published. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Whenever governments become destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it. Of course, that was the birth certificate of the United States of America on the 4th of July. And we celebrate today the 146th anniversary of what I consider to be the creation of the most important and human political system the world has ever known. But a couple of things that are very, very relevant to our discussion here today. And I'll make three. First of all, the Declaration of Independence, it was setting up an aspiration. In other words, this is what we would like to do. And of course, American history and the history of the world, frankly, has been an iterative process to implement this value of individual liberty, to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Individual liberty. Note that word. This is absolutely crucial. Okay, and for example, during the American Civil War, Abraham Lincoln quoted the Declaration at various times to say, "This is what we're fighting for when ultimately we abolish slavery in this country." So there are 3 points that really are relevant to the Declaration of Independence to our discussion today. First of all, we talk about gender issues. We're talking about equality before the law. Notice that the Declaration speaks of all men are created equal, and that and it uses the word man, it used the word mankind at various parts and so forth. Because at that time it was men who could vote, it was men who had the rights and so forth. Women weren't completely excluded, but it was an iterative process to get women to have the rights, for example, to vote and all the equal rights before the law. That's the first thing we talk about gender equality, the equal rights before the law. The same civil rights that a man has should be given to women, and of course to people who are of all colors and religions and the like. That's the first thing, and that's the first aspiration. The second is this, and this is in a sense more difficult, and that is the notion that we should look at each other as individuals. We all have a gender, we all have a race, we all have an ethnic background, we all have these kinds of things. But ultimately, when you judge people, you should judge them, in the words of Martin Luther King, by the content of their character, not the color of their skin. Meaning that, for example, in the workplace, we should treat men and women equally by their virtues, not by the fact that, well, this is a woman and I'm a man and I don't want to be supervised by a woman. I've worked for organizations where I have been, supervised by a woman, and I have, I've overseen men, women, and so forth in my role in various organizations as well. That's the most difficult thing. And you see in a lot of emerging countries, even if they have technically equal rights before the law, it's a very difficult thing to convince people because that you should treat women equally as individuals, because you have cultural biases and these sorts of things. And you even see it in this country, sadly, still, where some corporations will not will basically there's an attitude, we call it an old boys network, and the idea is that, well, this is a woman, she doesn't belong in our little club. She works here, she contributes, but hey, she's not really one of us. And that's a bit more difficult attitude. As many of you know, for example, in Saudi Arabia, it's only recently that women have even had the legal right to drive. And that was a difficult thing to get in that particular country. So that's the most difficult thing, especially in the emerging countries, to see women as equals. And yes, they have their gender, there's no denying that, but hey, that's the point, is equality, not only before the law, but seeing people as individuals. The final thing I'll mention is this. I've got to put this in the context of the Declaration, and that is to say that we're looking at the right of individuals to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We have a malady in this country now, I'm afraid to say, and I hope it doesn't spread to the Asia Pacific area, where we focus too much on accidents of birth and gender. And for example, maybe we should give women or others special rights. Or, if a woman does something, it's fine. If a man does exactly the same thing, well, it's sexism and it's this and that. And we even have the very weird situation, for example, as you probably know, the Leah Thompson incident, where a biological man, completely male, decided that he was a woman and participate in female swimming sports, and just won because men do tend to have biologically more massive muscles and so forth. And you have this weird situation where people say, well, I identify as whatever. It's not just a matter of identify as a man or a woman. It's they have all of these intricate things about their sexuality. It's bizarre. It's freakish. It is an abomination. Now, I want to say, for my 40 years as a career, I've worked with gay people. I've worked with one of the most insightful socioeconomic analysts in this country is transgender, Deirdre McCloskey. But the thing is, she's not a fake thing. She had an operation decades ago. And when I see her at conferences, nobody talks about what she is. We talk about her latest book, which is, usually incredible books. You should go out and read Deirdre McCloskey if you really want some incredible insight.
Hello.
The point is,
everyone. Welcome from Singapore.
Hello from Singapore. The point is that equality before the law, always. Seeing women and everybody, no matter who, as individuals, absolutely, and that's a real challenge. And don't get off on some of these weirdo things where you so focus on what is your sexual identity and what do I think about this and that and the other. Come on, guys, we're not interested in that. We're interested in your achievements. We're interested in what you do, what you make of yourself as a person. Okay, so get away from that stuff. Don't be infected by this malady that infects the United States, unfortunately, and others. And as I say, this is the 4th of July. I've got to get off, unfortunately, because I have two 11-year-old daughters. I love them. I want them to be the best in life. And they're right outside here waiting for me to come out and do things with them right now, because we're celebrating the 4th of July. Everybody listening to me in the Asia Pacific area, read the Declaration of Independence. It's the greatest political document ever written. So happy Independence Day, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Thank you very much. Hey, Jason.
Enjoy yourself. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Edward. We have our Honorable Chair, Professor Kirpal Singh, world famous speaker from Singapore. He joined today's session. I would like to give chance our Honorable Chair, Professor Kirpal Singh. Professor Kirpal.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thanks. The question that I will pose really, does gender really matter in human transactions today, considering the state we arrived at now? You know,
Is he breaking up for me or everybody?
For everybody.
For everybody.
Yeah,
Can't hear
everybody.
me.
Hi, Ali.
Kirpo. Can't hear you. Hello from Singapore. Are you there? Oh, we
Professor
lost.
Kipal, can you hear me?
yeah, everyone hear me?
Sorry, Professor David Smith. Yeah.
I believe Edwards did a good job of beginning to set this up and how the different pieces come together. Um, Gender equity is a concept that has many different components into it. And some of it is uh, how you're perceived, some of it is actually your sex, which is different than gender in many ways. And some of it really is um, culturally based. Some of it looks at many different ways. And one of the things Edward said I totally agree with is sometimes we get carried away with parts, like the example he used of a male participating in women's sports where strength and endurance and things are different. By the same token, I see places where women would be able, uh, females would be able to totally blow me away if it comes to pain endurance and other things like that. So you see those type of examples. But in my view, a lot of progress has been made, but there's a lot more progress to be made. The World Economic Forum, in a recent publication, actually came back and said they believe that it's going to take 170 years to have gender equity hit, and it's in a very interesting way with that because their definition of gender equity, in essence, says that gender as a mindset will diminish, and and I think that is actually a wrong definition of, to me, gender equity. I believe there's things that we're perfectly on par with each other, and I think it's getting better. You know, if I look at education, uh, the females make up now a higher percentage of advanced degrees in universities than males do, and that has changed tremendously in the last 40 years. Um, you're seeing the initiative, particularly in the United States, but others, where women entrepreneurs are now becoming increasingly closer to equal as you look at women entrepreneurs. In fact, in some ways, that pendulum has swung a little far to make up for the past, in that the number of female only venture capital funds, the number of programs dedicated that way are very high. So, in some ways, if I was female, I'd actually have opportunity to a broader range of funds than I have as a biological male. So, you see that happening. But the other part that I just really think that is really where we're seeing differences yet is that the role of gender is something that are going away in many ways. You know, there is a, like I said, the common misconception that gender and sex are the words to use the same thing, but they're very different. You know, I love that this professor of sociology at Stanford um, said that gender of a person is a social phenomenon,
By the way,
and that it is how culturally, socially the perceptions are. And that, on the other hand, that being a man or woman is different from being a female or a male. And there's another real interesting author, Kate Gels, which is the author of the book that's What is Gender and Why is Gender Important, really goes back to the differences between it. And if you look at the studies, some of the polls, they're really closing. The biggest differences that you see in the studies and the polls are that by orders of magnitude, uh, women are perceived to be better caregivers, better parents, better mothers than men can be. And
Mm-hmm.
in my experience, I perceive the same thing. You begin to see others where traditional male roles have been broken down. I have friends who drive large, female friends who drive large construction equipment. And in some ways, they do it a lot better than males because they tend to be more precise. Uh, so there's places where the roles, I believe, are equal, but I love how the pieces come together in the progress. The forecast of the World Economic Forum that it's going to take 170 more years for gender equity, I believe is off by about 50%. But I think gender equity is a generational concept too, and that these generational concepts are what's taking the time to change. So, Sharif, that's my first view.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
That's
Professor
very,
Kirpa.
very interesting. We have several women watching. Would any of you like to respond, dear ladies?
Yes.
Oh, you can hear me, Tahira?
Madam Tahira, you
Yeah,
want to share your views?
yeah, I
Can
can
you hear
hear
me
you,
now?
Kirpa. Yeah, it was just
Yes.
Can you hear me
buzzing a
now?
bit. Yeah,
Tahira, can
Barely, a little
your
bit.
mic,
you hear me now?
softly.
No? Still
We,
can't,
we can
huh?
hear you a little bit. Go ahead and try it. Let's see what happens.
Madam Tahira,
Okay,
you want to
yes.
add your views about
Now you're
gender?
muted. I always
Oh,
muted.
you can hear me now? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay. This is a very broad topic. Gender issues. There's so many facets to this, actually. Um, so many things you can look at, and so many matters. I mean, from the labeling of genders, now they say he, you even decide whether you want to say he or she, in forms you fill out, or her or he. So that's another matter, the labeling. And then there is about empowerment, about the glass ceiling, and then there's about uh, how women or men are dealt with, or the Me Too movement. Now the Men Too movement is coming up. So there's so many facets of this. But why are all these things coming up? Why is it becoming more and more? And it's like it's a boiling point. And I feel it's because it's a realization to all of us that we need to start looking at the human being. We've been labeling ourselves, and we have been. There's men attacking women, women attacking men, or men are like this, women are like this. So we are being reminded that we need to start looking at the human being. I think the whole issue about labels is not, I mean, we should not be focusing too much on that and really go into the substance of the person. How are they contributing to society? What are they saying? What are they doing? Then rather than just say, than giving uh, additional benefits because you're a woman, or making it a little bit easier for you because you're a woman. And I'm saying this as a woman. It shouldn't be that way. So it's time to look beyond the gender, not look and and gender equity as I say. I was looking beyond the gender. I would say that's a better way of approaching it. We can never really achieve gender equity because we are different as men and women. We have different uh, things that we can contribute to the world, and I would like to be identify myself as a woman because I feel that, and as a man who'd feel that. But I would like people to see me beyond my gender, and how am I contributing, and not respond to me according to what they see. Just that, as like you see in the developing countries, some developing countries, not all. My origins, I mean, I'm born in Singapore. My origins are part Pakistani, part Afghan. So I've come from a culture where my father's side was brought up with hijab. Okay, my aunts were married off at 15, mostly child brides. So that was normal. And then my mom's side, Pakistan, forced marriage. So we grew up like that. I mean, of course, me and my siblings did not see that, but um, it is such a liberation, because I see that a lot of the gender issues are resolved already. Now we don't see that so much in Pakistan. Afghanistan is still an issue, but it's become less. So a lot of gender issues have been resolved. Now the real thing is taking it to another level of going beyond gender. So yeah, so what I'm saying is that we should also look at what we've achieved so far. The world has really progressed quite a bit. I could never imagine any of my relatives, my cousins going through what our ancestors have gone through, my grandparents have gone through. It's unthinkable. So to acknowledge that, and now we are faced with different kind of tests now. So going beyond gender and looking at the person and being fair. I wonder if you've been watching some of these celebrity cases. I never watch it really, but I was so surprised by this whole Johnny Depp and Amber Heard case. And now the whole Men Too movement has come about. It's very interesting. So again, that's a realization that women can also be abusers. You can't assume that we believe all women. We need to believe the person. So I think that's where the world is right now, and we need to go back to that. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. This is really interesting discussions. Madam Alida, is what you want to add about these gender issues? What's your view? We get views from
Yeah,
Singapore.
I agree with the previous speakers actually that kind of our individual nature is much more important than what gender we are or how we fit into a kind of a box. And I think the labeling thing's quite curious to me because definitely I've got teenage children and that she, he, that pronoun thing is really important to them. And it feels like an unnecessary thing to me and I think kind of for my generation, it's kind of hard to get your head around, I think. But for the the younger generation, it's really important that that people see them as in the identity that they want them to see. And I think the kind of gender equality for me, one of the things that happens is when you have children, because I think that massively changes life and your perception of what's important. And I think the role of a mother is just as important as anything else that you do. In fact, it's probably the most important role you ever have. And it's a privileged position to be in. So I think the thing is that underrating, the role that a mother has and parenthood is also something that people need to be aware of as well. So I don't think kind of accomplishments, if you have incredible children that are supported and also, it's back to achieve their potential as well. That's just as important as achieving your own. So I think that's also kind of like it's another dimension to the gender equality. And I know when we had children and they were babies, that Jason was just as hands-on and involved as I was as well. So I think, the equality is definitely kind of swung so that, it's much more, it's kind of expected, definitely here in the UK. that it's a shared role, and both of you have mutual responsibility. So I think that's kind of a good thing. And definitely, you know, so I think perceptions on what roles were suitable for women. You know, when we were growing up, my dad said that we should do typing and computer science or something, and his perception was that, you know, that most women would be secretaries or, you know, and so I think now there's much more, you know, I've got as much expectation for my daughter as I have for my son to pursue a career that, you know, that fits their talents and skills. So I think that's, you know, the most important thing is that you recognise your talents and skills and you're supported so that you can reach your potential. And, you know, ideally that should happen. And I think culturally, the expectations are massively different in other areas of the world. So we're really lucky to be where we are. And, you know, that there is a lot more equality here than there's ever been. But maybe it's not the same in other places. So, yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Jason.
Yeah, I think it's kind of sad what has been happening recently with the, you know, the Supreme Court. We're taking a step back. You know, I'm in the United States Transhumanist Party, so I kind of have a lot of my beliefs aligned directly with their platform, and they're kind of unique in that they're not neither right or left, and one of the main pillars of the platform is morphological freedom, which means that you have your soul, you know, autonomy over your own body. You know, the party is also firmly in support of science and bringing you know, science and health and longevity into the whole political sphere. So with that being its main tenet, it would be just stupid to say that they're not pro-life. They want everybody to live, not just the babies. You know what I mean? So but yet we support morphological freedom because that's, you know, a pillar. The thing though, where I think a whole lot of the problem and the place where Democrats and Republicans meet and they just don't see what the others are seeing. And I actually, this might be where I tend to lean conservative because I raised 3 boys and I'm very, you know, protective of children. I think that children should be allowed to grow up naturally, you know, whatever that may be, you know, and then, you know, and so I think sometimes the Democrats will try to, or the left, or whatever you want to call it, they will try to sort of target the children and think in that the idea is, well, you know, by the time we get to the next generation, you know, we'll be good. But, you know, I mean, think about the parent. I mean, that's, you know, the conservative father, you know, is going to be like, why are you trying to, you know, push your agenda on my kids, you know, and that's going to freak them out, you know, and I think that's a whole lot of why some people on the right resist so much of the, you know, like the transgender movement and, you know, because it freaks them out. You know, they get scared about their kids and they get scared about, you know, stuff, you know, the whole idea about conservatism, you know, is that you want to be careful about your progress into the future. And so, you know, any stuff like that seems like a threat to them and sometimes. And so I just think that, you know, the left could be more mindful about that and realize that it isn't necessarily that they're mad at you, but they're just freaked out by it. You know, it scares them. They don't like where the world's going. They liked it the way it was, and now everybody knows the world can't stay the same. But still, so let's hope we can get there sooner. That thing David said, wow, about the 150 or however whatever 70 years, that surprised the heck out of me. I was like, whoa, I'd love to hear more about that. I'm wondering how the heck they got that. I mean, because that's that's kind of depressing. That means we ain't gonna get our act together for 150 years. Jeez, man, that's that's bad. Actually, with the science and technology coming out, and the ability to morph your own body into transgender and trans whatever, the ability to change things, I think it's going to put a whole new dynamic on the the debate or the whole thought process. I mean, just like designer babies could throw the whole racist debate into I mean, if anybody can just be whatever race they want, well, I don't know, it makes it makes being racist a little difficult, I guess. And let's hope. I tend to think that all these technologies coming out are going to help us and be for the better. And we're getting there slowly but surely. Go ahead, Sharif.
Thank you. Madam Tahira, specifically in Asia, we have a lot of challenges for women. Uh, I'm actually from Bangladesh. Our Prime
Okay.
Minister's, I want to
Is a
say,
woman.
she's a
Yeah.
very successful woman political
Hmm.
leader. Uh, but still, there are many lot of social stigma. We have to overcome from this situation, especially in the COVID-19 situation. Women face a lot of challenges. Many women lose their job. Even
Yeah.
how we calculate GDP and everything, we never calculate women uh, economic contributions properly in the grassroots level. So, what is your advice for these developing nations? How we can actually, I'm a researcher. One of my PhD on gender issues.
Mm.
So, what is your advice for developing nations and how we can overcome from this challenging situation?
Well, you know, I was actually one of the spokesperson for World Vision for Afghanistan. The Afghan women, uh, the whole child bride matter is still there, and so, of course, so the issue is very severe right now. There's while the rest of the world is talking about the labels and all that, the developing world is in a very dark place. It's such a wide gap in terms of gender issues. It's huge. Where I've had when I was down in Pakistan, I mean, sometimes women disappear because of honor killing. It still exists. Afghanistan, it still exists. While the rest of the world is advancing so rapidly. In Singapore, a woman can get anything done. Uh, when it comes to divorce matters, when it comes to any kind, they have a lot of support. So the developing countries in general for women is just lagging behind. But then again, you hear about Malala, the case about Malala and how she's changing things in Pakistan. Pakistan, for example, women are very strong now. But the women who are very strong in Pakistan are the ones who are very wealthy. The ones who are not wealthy are nowhere. So again, from what I realized, that it has got to do with your status, your wealth status. So the women who are come from the lower income, they don't have any chance uh, to really get any of the opportunities for them. Bangladesh is a different country because of your leader. That your leader is so great. Well, places like Pakistan, Afghanistan, totally disrupted countries where women from less from lower income, they're just going nowhere, you know. So it's a huge problem. Uh, Many of them, for example, when I was down in the colonies in Pakistan, the only way to get out of that was to find a way to leave the country. Some of the women I know had progressed dramatically after they've left and gone to England. And now they have great opportunities. So they have to leave their country in order to make it. So it's income status. That is an issue. Bangladesh has solved that uh, by giving opportunities for women to be entrepreneurs. Professor Yunus was famous for that, right? So this is one way that we can actually achieve women can become more empowered is through their status, wealth status. If you have nothing in your bank, you can't say anything. You're going to be sold off as a child bride. And most women get sold off as child brides because the family doesn't have enough money. That's the main, it's all about money. In advanced country, you don't see those issues because women do have the education and all that. So education and money, that's how we can solve this issue. And the men in these countries always look down on the women because they think that they are dependent on them. They're lesser. So education is key to solve this problem. Boys from young are retold that your sister is less than you. They're taught that way. The grandmother and mother will always say, okay, the boy is more important. The grandmother's massaging the boy, but never massage the daughter. So I'm saying is that they're always treated like they're more important in the family. So that family needs to be educated about the gender issue. So many things. Parents need to be educated. This is the reason why in my family, I mean, my grandfather left we are Afghan. My father made sure that the women had the high level education. And would always say that not to focus and on the gender too much. This is what he always felt because it was a reaction what he's witnessed through our family in Afghanistan. It was so severe. So educating the families is key to solve this. Which I found just important.
Excellent, excellent. Yes, ma'am, I agree with you. Actually, when you discuss about educating, empowering women, entrepreneurship, actually, I can remember my grandmother. My grandmother's had 11 children, 5 daughters, and she actually made everyone highly educated. And this is the key to make some success, make some breakthroughs in Bangladesh. So definitely, I request all of our audience, those who from developing nations, we have to be more focused on educations, women empowerment, economical sustainabilities. So we can take a lot of entrepreneurship initiative. We have our professor from South Africa, Professor Mamo. Can you hear me, Professor Mamo? Okay, sorry, I think. Okay, Professor David Smith, what you want to add, especially when educations and entrepreneurship initiatives come? So, what is your advice for women entrepreneurship?
Well, Sharif, I think education is one of the great elements that equalize the discussion like we're having today. And it's one of the biggest changes you've seen over the centuries when you start looking at how people treat other people. You see the elements of education. You see the elements of, as Tria said, the family. The family is probably one of the greatest influencers on how you perceive others and how you work with others. The other is you begin to see today is that in the past centuries, by default, they were regionalized cultures. They were regionalized epic centers of how you treat others, how you think about others. But today, with globalization, with digitalization, we're seeing that our ability to enact change has tremendously changed from a regional initiative into one that is more global. And we're seeing that begin to work. One of the downsides of the current world situation with the activity in Ukraine and others is that we're seeing communication shut off. We're seeing the ability to freely communicate ideas, concepts, beginning to be held back before. And even in places that's kind of interesting, I've done some work over the last several years with the Ministry of Science in Afghanistan. And when we first started giving them some input, all the leadership in the Ministry of Science was male. The last time I was over in meetings with the Ministry of Science in Afghanistan, the leadership had changed to about 40% female, which over a period of a couple of years, to me, a dramatic change. And we're seeing that globally around the world today. And I think that is a good thing. If I look at the research and look at the science elements, I'm increasingly seeing more and more publications by women, and that's a very good thing. Where I hope we get at some point is I hope that we see competencies and capabilities more than we see a distinction based on gender. And I think that is going to be an important milestone. I agree with Ali Rice in that I believe that being a parent, and particularly being a mom, but being a parent, is one of the greatest things we can do with our greatest responsibility. But also, it depends upon the parents to help the children understand the gender issues we're talking about. And the question you posed on this is, are they even relevant anymore in today's world? It's being less and less, but yet still today they are relevant. And I'm seeing that progress. And there are so many geopolitical activities that influence this issue. It's hard to address it still globally yet, which I hope we can down the road, because the geopolitical considerations, such as the ones that I talked about with children brides and others, are still issues that affect this, but will change generational. And Jason, that's why I think the World Economics Forum had that forecast out that far, is that it is a generational issue, and that progress is made in each generation. And fortunately, in the last two generations, actually the last three generations, we have seen a big jump ahead of it and a greater awareness, but not just a greater awareness, a greater ability to take action. Because as you've heard me say before, the real change here is once you have the information, how do you turn it into knowledge? How do you turn that knowledge into wisdom and the wisdom into action? And I think on gender issues, we now have it at the knowledge stage, but we really still need to work it through the wisdom. And once the wisdom there, the equality of action is what should come after that. So Sharif, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Madam Ali Rice.
Yeah. Oh, it's fascinating, isn't it? So the other thing that I think there's other things that come into play. So we live in a rural area, and the closest city is probably Worcester or Birmingham or Gloucester. So I think the thing is that as in kind of Asian Pacific areas, I would think if rural areas here don't offer as much opportunity, then the same would be there as well. And that's aside from the equality, issue of men and women. So I think there's there's obviously different roles and different opportunities depending on where you're located. And I think one of the things that's interesting since 2020 is that technology has come to the fore so that we can have an online presence that does impact our locality and a global audience that wasn't there before. And I think that's one of the most exciting things that's happened, and that kind of addresses opportunity for both men and women to reach people in a different way. So I was involved in 2 years of training during 2020 and 2021, and most of the women that I was amongst were all women entrepreneurs from around the world. So I think the thing is, and I think as we go forward, the percentage of women that are involved in leadership roles it will increase hugely, and the way that they lead is much more kind of embracing and inclusive, and kind of comes from a different place, really. So I just think there's kind of a compassionate kind of understanding of how everything's interconnected. And I think the most, from my point of view, whoever works for you, if they've got an autonomous role so that they have responsibility and they're playing to their strengths, whether they're men or women, the reason that they're successful is because they love and they're passionate for what they do. And that's regardless of gender. That's what's fulfilling, is if you're skilled and you're using those skills to make a difference. And I think that's what's important. So arguably the gender isn't as relevant as it was, because from my point of view, everyone's got potential if they only realize that they have, so I think it's a question of tapping into the potential and having organizations or frameworks to enable that to happen. So yeah, and definitely in the school that my children are at, they really support creativity. It's not just about academics, and I think fundamentally we all create our futures and our lives, and it's the decisions we make and the actions that we take that do that. So it's kind of, and that's just as relevant if you're a 14-year-old girl or a 17-year-old boy. I've been going to open days with my son, and in a year's time he'll be going off to university. And interestingly, he wants to pursue a TV and film career. And the thing is that for me, I think that the most important thing you can do is support your children so they achieve their dreams. And the people that achieve their dreams don't give up on them, they persevere. So, it's kind of, so from my outlook, anything's possible as long as you're supported and you're safe. So I think that's if you're supported and you're safe. And I think, the child brides that we were talking about, that they aren't issues that we have to deal with, thank God. But that's the thing, is that we need to work towards a world when those issues aren't there and children are free to be children and be supported so that they can choose and make their own decisions for their lives as well.
Thank you. Mr. Jason. Mr. Jason.
Yeah. I got a question for Tahira. But first, I want to say, this whole idea about, honestly, I really don't have an answer, because, like, the guy in Afghanistan that treats women like that, it just completely escapes me. I have no idea what could be in that guy's head and why they would treat women that way. It's beyond me. But that being said, so I'm not even going to try to think of how to fix them guys, because I have no clue. But I'm wondering, you had mentioned education and money. If you had like a magic wand or something, and you could give every girl in Afghanistan a cell phone and have a whole lesson curriculum for them, what lessons do you think would be most valuable for them to learn that they could get out of that cell phone and then use that knowledge to maybe change your situation somehow. I'm wondering what.
Practical, something that is practical so they can earn, so they were not at the mercy of being sold off.
So
Something
really,
they can, so that they're not the mercy of being sold off. So practical skills, vocational, I would say. And also it'll be also good for them to learn how to research. So the provision of books and all that, if it's possible. But most important is practical skills. Yeah, like I think one of the things they're looking at is
maybe even something like web
crafts
design.
and sorry.
Maybe even something like web design or
Yeah,
you know,
practical skills where they can make money online.
online, right?
Yeah, and you don't have to go in, you don't have to travel anywhere, and they can just join, some of those websites, and that's happening actually. It's already happening. So slowly, these women are emerging out of it slowly. But some are trapped because it again depends on the head of the household.
Yeah, I was surprised when you said that it has some to do with the culture and the family too.
It has
I,
got to
I
do with the culture, not so
yeah,
much religion alone.
yeah, I thought it was really mostly religion, honestly.
No, it's got to do with culture. You see, I'll tell you why. Indonesia is mostly Indonesia. Indonesia is mostly Muslim. Afghanistan is of course mostly Muslim,
Yeah,
highest percentage. Pakistan is an Islamic country, but Pakistan you don't even wear, hardly any women wear the hijab.
mhm,
Hardly any women wear hijab in Pakistan, but
right.
in Afghanistan it's a niqab. This means you only see the eyes. So it's not really got to do with the religion.
Hmm.
It's the culture, and it's got to do with what has been imposed in that environment. Malaysia is also a Muslim country, but you can do whatever you want in Malaysia. You can have bars and all that. So it's not the religion.
Yeah,
So various
Russians
degrees.
and the U.S. both sort of didn't get that through their heads when they both tried to take over and try to do nation building in Afghanistan. The culture, it just
They
wasn't,
thought it.
you
They
know.
didn't think about it that way. They had some other agenda. So it's
Mm,
got to do with the culture. It's got to do with the family needs to be educated. They need to be given awareness teaching. They need to be taught that. Yes. That is going to help a lot. So awareness teaching for the parents, for they're passing on their teachings to the children, and the children is going to pass it on to their children.
uh-huh.
That kind of thinking, mindset.
Man, I could see what kind of lesson. I mean, what would you teach the parents though? I mean, how would you, you know?
The best way to show the parents is that for example, people of their own race who have achieved great things and transformed, and they'll teach, and these people giving them the wisdom. Like, for example, people like myself and others who are of the same race, and giving them awareness and understanding of how it should be and how they can improve the lives of their family if they think in a different way and the future generations. So it's a bit of an awakening for them, uh, for the future of their family. If they shift their thinking a bit, treat their daughters a bit more uh, with honor than to treat them as just a girl who's a bit of a burden and
Yeah,
yes, needs to be
it
married off.
seems to me that um, I don't know. The natural way that I think societies would normally evolve would be for gender equality or whatever
When you're suffering and you can't even pay the bills, you can't even put food on the table, you don't think about those things.
Well, yeah. 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 Geez, where would you go? Hanging up on us, Sharif, or what? Just kidding.
Okay.
Man,
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Professor David Smith, what's your concluding remarks for today's session?
I would like to go back for just a second to the remarks that were at the opening of this program. And it is that we hold it self-evident that all people, changing from the original here in the United States, that all people are created equal and have the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And I think if we can embrace that over the generations, this issue will continue to improve and equalize more. I've been fortunate to travel a lot around the world and see the differences in the many different countries and regions. And um, I think, as some of the listeners know, I was in the Dominican Republic and Haiti 2 weeks ago, and you saw the differences there pretty starkly between the two nations on that one island. And that's a small island, much less try to look at these globally. Um, the discussion that was just between Tori and Jason illustrates that too, as we look at the role of faith, the role of politics, the role of education, the role of our families and our culture all have with this issue. And like so many of the topics you bring up, Sharif, this truly, again, is a topic that we have to look at from a systems of systems view. And that all of those are systems influencing how the greater outcomes happen. We cannot just change one of them because they're a system of the other systems as well. And so this is a complex issue, but progress has been made. Progress will continue to make. There are distractions a lot around the road. There's places where the pendulum swings too far from one side to the other side, and we'll equalize those out as we go. But this is a defining issue for future generations. And like I said, much progress has been made, but there's still a way to go for all genders. And it's one that we need to take into account, that we need to be mindful of the whole and not just the parts, because without the parts put together, you really do not have the whole. So, Sharif, thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor. Madam Aliraj, what's your concluding remarks for today's session?
I think in conclusion that it's important that we realise that everyone's kind of entitled and should kind of achieve their potential, have access to opportunity no matter what gender they are. And I think the foundation comes from families. So, in countries that have a different cultural view of their girls, that the role models that are change makers and mold breakers, that are making people realize that there's other choices, they're the ones that we need to they need to focus on, to realize there's other ways of doing things, so that their lives is kind of pursue another avenue that's positive for everybody. So it's kind of, because essentially that I think from the age of kind of up to about maybe 40, so it's our choices as parents from like 0 to 7 to 14, until one of the things that we've done as parents is we've always listened to our children. And I think years and years ago, children were expected to be quiet and do what they were told. I think as when you have your own children, you realize just how aware they are, and if you spend enough time with them, you realize that it's very obvious what they love quite early on. So I think the thing is that so I think culturally we need to do things differently so children have a voice and get to make choices, and I think that would fundamentally make a difference, and they need to be in in a situation when those choices are listened to, and that that they can act on them and support them. So, and I think it's role models that have broken the mold that will kind of to help them find a way forward.
Thank you, Mr. Jason. So concluding remarks for today's session.
So yeah, I think David is completely right that this is like a huge complex problem, and the only little thing that I see that we could do is put together educational websites for them and make them free to access. I mean, they could be trained to make those, little web design, little build a Wix website, throw some lesson plans on there. There's like free YouTube videos with all kinds of educational tutorials. Could then just put it in whatever language. Of course, that doesn't give them the technology to reach it, the cell phone that they need. But Sheridan Satsuno, I remember him saying, how much of an impact he was able to have, or some project, and all they did was just hand the cell phones out, and they were able to like monitor all kinds of this economic or environmental stuff and that. So I'm a little bit optimistic that some sort of philanthropic project that handed cell phones out with education, with the right education, could maybe go a long way. It's an idea.
Thank you, Professor Mamu. Oh, sorry. Thank you, everyone. This is really great session for World Talent Economy Forum, and you know that from today, the World Talent Economy Forum, we are collaborating with Pod TVs, and our content actually heavily promoting Amazon and Roku. So hopefully, we will more of the audience from around the world, they can join and they can learn from today's sessions. And I request all of our audience, please share our content with your government agencies, with corporations, and with academia. And definitely, we want to do more research. We want to contribute for policy. So from our speaker, those who interested to collaborate with World Talent Economy Forum, we are happy to do that. Thank you, Madam Tahira, Professor David Smith, Madam Ali Rice, Mr. Jason, and Professor Mamu. I'm sorry, I cannot connect Professor Mamu. He is also a famous professor from South Africa. So thank you, everyone, for joining today's session. Thank you. Bye-bye and take care.
Take care. Bye.